and you thought you were having a bad week. This claptrap you're looking at here is none other than Rochelle Walensky. She is the Deputy Director and Public Mouthpiece, emphasis on mouth, for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, she's been out front and she's been having just a banner week all the way around. You see the evidence for what many of us have known from the very beginning of this thing and have preached incessantly at anybody who would listen is finally coming to fruition, and it's so big and so overwhelming that it can no longer be ignored. Things like, this. This right here that you're looking at is a table illustrating how in simply one jurisdiction, the vast chasm of difference between the numbers of people who are hospitalized with COVID and the number of people who are hospitalized for COVID. You see, some of us have been drawing that distinction from the very beginning, and we were called tinfoil hat and science deniers and excuse makers and, all manner of just detrimental things, shall we say, and we'll leave it at that, for pointing out the obvious, that there is an important distinction between being hospitalized with COVID or for COVID, between dying with COVID or of COVID. These are important distinctions, particularly when one has to take into consideration things like, the overall death number. But as if this weren't bad enough, Walensky is having to deal with the narrative crumbling at the same time that Biden's much vaunted mask mandate is before the United States Supreme Court. Pictured here, affirmative action justice Sonia Sotomayor first tried to deny that what was on trial even was a mandate. When that narrative didn't last past the first 5 to 10 minutes, she resorted to the most shameless spewing of disinformation that you'd ever see. Stuff that would get you and I banned from social media. She actually said with a straight face that Omicron was just as deadly as Delta. Said with a straight face that there were literally hundreds of thousands of children hospitalized with Omicron or Delta, and many of them were on ventilators. Now, none of these things were true, and basically she did manage to show her true colors in the meantime and between time in a way that, once again, you find yourself absolutely undeniable. But we come back to this table and we come back to Ms. Walensky, and neither one of these things are going to be able to run interference for very much longer. Now, the administration's going to try to roll with the punches. They're going to try to fold it right in as if this was just a casual and gradual and completely organic evolution of the narrative instead of, holy shit, we got caught and we're going to have to switch up. But even if they did manage to fold it seamlessly with the aid of their nonstop propaganda arm, the legacy media, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you've still got an entire cult of people for whom this is normal to wear to an airport. You have developed literally an entire civilization-size cult of people that don't find anything even remotely disturbing about dressing their child like this to go to school. No matter what happens with the narrative, it's all coming unwound. That cannot be changed. Where we go and how this cult of fear that they have cultivated for so very long is going to shake out when it finally does fall apart remains to be seen. But I can promise you it's going to be entertaining. The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, not sponsors, and certainly not employers. They have been adjudicated thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They are coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind, and they are guaranteed to choke you with a big, fat dose of the truth cock. Boys and girls, welcome back. It's time once again for the Sunday sermon. Had to work a little late today, a little technical difficulty, but we got it rolling. We're out of the starting gate now. Let's all get together the energy, bring it on in for the drum roll. Yes. Good evening to all my reverends, rangers, all of my prophets of doom, all of my sinner sisters out there from coast to coast. And maybe in some places we don't even know about. Maybe in a place in Langley, Virginia, where my caseworker's keeping an eye on me. Who fucking knows? I don't like to flatter myself like that. I'm not that important. I'm just a crane operator with some opinions, man. Fat, toothless cripple that rants and raves at you. But you guys keep showing up, and I appreciate it. Love you guys for the support. Love you guys for making it out, man. Wow, what a week. What a crazy week. We got a lot of stuff to cover. We're getting started a little late. I'm going to try to jump right in and plow through this thing, make sure we get all of our stuff covered. Do a real quick roll call. See who's on board. G-Dub. G-Dub, good to see you, buddy. I appreciate all of the stuff that you have done to spread that gospel, man. You've helped to build the audience. You've helped to expose me to other folks that might not have been turned on to the program before, and, you know, you've thrown some encouraging words. It's very good times, G-Dub. I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you for being around. We've got Roman and Carrie from Opium Tales, opiumtales.com, the erotic pinups and portraits people. More on that later. Nice to see you guys are here. I think we got all the tech issues lined out. Let me know over here. Brother Joel Allen Jackson. Oh, the stories we could tell. And one day we will, as soon as the statute of limitations runs out. Brother Mike, the left's favorite excuse. It's organic. Reminds me of the Oregon gas crisis a few years back, you know. You want to use the pump with the green handle. Green gas. It's better for the environment. Something. Brother Wayne Sharp, good to see you, man. I hope your brother is around somewhere. I haven't seen Mr. Larry in a little bit. Answered a couple of technical questions on some equipment the other day for him, but hadn't seen him here for the Sunday sermon. I know he's a busy guy, but it's always good to see either or both of you show up, man. I just, it's good to have those touchstones from all the way back in the high school days. You guys knew me when I was just a little lunatic larva before I blossomed and went through my cocoon phase and emerged a beautiful butterfly of hell. Something. I don't know, man. Babs, what's going on? Look at you, pretty mama. Nice to see you on board. Maxima Adrian Espinal. Okay, right on. And Dominus Oblis to you. I don't know. Was that Latin Catholic Mass? I don't know. My languages are a little weird, a little weak these days. Fucking with you guys, man. Barbara, good to have you on board. Good to have all of you guys on board, all the usual suspects. You guys already know about the bumper music. You guys follow it every single week, and we started off the same way every single week. That is a band called Red Desert from the smoldering embers of the once great city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Name of the track is Older, No Wiser. Every week I get a little bit older, and every week you guys get to decide if I've gotten any wiser. Some weeks I do better than others. Don't expect much out of me this week, man. It's rough. You guys follow me on any of my other social media feeds. Let me see. You go ahead and fade this music out. We'll get everything underway. If you guys follow me on any of my other social media feeds, like on Instagram in particular, man, just took a couple of pictures at the start of the workday. And, of course, it's been early morning for the past couple of days. We got really high work volume right now, which is cool. And I'm totally all right with that. I may be working for the devil, but when you work for the devil, you at least know that the checks are going to clear. And that is it's a refreshing thing in this day and age. Also, as Roman was just saying, using big fancy college words like algorithm, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, spread the word no matter what format. If you're watching on Twitter, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, if you're checking out on Facebook Live, give us a like, kind of drive us up in that ever popular algorithm, get a little bit better exposure. James Pearson, nice sound and everything. Yeah, we had a little hiccup coming out of the starting gate. Took me a minute to get the jump off on this thing, but I think we got it under control now, and hopefully it'll last for the duration. So. Again, thank you to everybody that I already shouted out in the roll call. If I missed anybody, apologies in advance. Besides besides the hectic work schedule, hello, Tommy. I've also been dealing with a little bit of a stress-related bleeding ulcer issue. that's created some havoc for me, but I've managed to, I've been getting by on like oatmeal and protein shakes. Been avoiding solid food for the most part because it's just going to come right back up again. But I have stayed active in the gym and I've kept getting my lift on and everything like that. I have taken the appropriate precautions, the appropriate amount of rest, and all of these things, to get to give these old bones a rest when they need it so we get proper recuperation in. A couple of quick sponsor shout outs. As always, Roman and his lovely wife, Carrie, and of course, Roxy and Allie and the bevy of beautiful women over at opiumtales.com. They are the erotic pinups and portraits people. You get to see some of Roman's artwork. He gets to paint lovely portraits of these god awesome, beautiful women. And you get testosterone driven commentary in the same place. Really fucking cool thing. But you got to find him now on the website at opiumtales.com because Jack Boots Dorsey has Jack booted him right off the Twitter platform. So you can't find him there anymore. And that was always refreshing on the Twitter feed. Also, real quick, they are not a sponsor and I am still looking into it. Getter, Gettr. I'm hearing good things. I'm hearing bad things, but I have downloaded the app and I'm going through it and looking at the whole service agreement. But the mighty Joe Rogan has made that move. He has shifted gears and he is over onto Getter now. And I think a lot more people, very prominent individuals that the legacy media and regular big tech simply can no longer censor anymore. They're going to be making that move. And a lot of other platforms are going to be opening up as this progresses. You guys, and we're going to get into this more later, you guys saw the interview that Rogan did with McCullough a couple of weeks back, talking about how early treatment has been suppressed and the way that surprise, validation for all of us who have said this from the very beginning, that Big Pharma is basically in bed with the United States government and CDC. It's not anything that any of us didn't know. But again, for the Grazer horde, it's going to be new facts to them. And it shook a lot of people up. That thing, last I checked, had received 50 million views. You can no longer silence something like that, no matter what. So check that out. Okay, good. Good to know. You are Opium Tales on Getter. Cool. Good to know. I am gonna be Rev Bart on Getter once the profile is up and activated. Is this? Whoa! Look at that, Wallace Leo Morgan. You have a great show. I love what you're doing. What, man, bro? Thank you. That was wow, man. That was completely out of the blue. I'm gonna type a little note to myself to get in touch with you after the program, man, so we can catch up. But thank you very much, man. Just completely out of nowhere. See, this is the stuff that I live for. When you have folks that you would not have really expected would be, that they're friends of yours. You know that they're good comedians, that they are skilled skydivers, or whatever arena it is that these people from, and then just out of nowhere one of these individuals from one of those circles just pops up and hits you with that. I love what you're doing. That's what keeps me coming back, man. Well, that and the fact that this is cheaper than therapy, but yes, it definitely keeps me coming back. So thank you very much, Mr. Morgan, for that. And I'll be getting in touch with you after the program. Second sponsor shout out. You guys already know where I'm going with this. Casey and Dusty Tellison, my Viking brothers from Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. They have smoked my holiday birds ever since I arrived in the Inland Northwest. Back in starting in 2014. I actually got here in 2013, but I did not meet the brothers until the early part of 2014. And by the time it got around to Thanksgiving, there's like nobody else on the planet that was going to be smoking the holiday bird for the Bart Bunkers. So they're on board. They get the long ship out. Aaron, correct me on this. Don't worry about being late. Correct me on this if my understanding is that they are at American Gun and Pawn off of Sprague out in the valley Thursdays. Again, they're back on that regular schedule. They start, again, American Gun and Pawn off of Sprague in Spokane Valley, and they start at 11 and they serve until they run out, and it goes quickly. So get there, man. Guy Fieri, love them. Love them so much. They had him featured on the program. They're good people. They are the Viking brothers, man. Casey and Dusty have been outstanding friends to me for the duration of my time in the Northwest. And my God, the fucking barbecue. Seriously, I've gotten Texans up there. Sonny Puzikas, the ribs are now Spetsnaz approved. Because he did not, of all the places, to get that level of really badass barbecue, he would not have thought Spokane, Washington, but he was coming through, staying at the bunker for a week, and we hung out, and Dusty brought some ribs by, and the skies parted and the heavenly angelic choirs did sing. So definitely give it a check, and go spend some of your money with these guys. Take care of the people that take care of the program. Because if you dig what I'm laying down, these are the guys that make it possible. So thank you to Roman and Carrie. Thank you to Casey and Dusty. And thank you to all the other people that will be getting a mention as this thing rolls forward. Right now, just a little sip of liquid enthusiasm so I can keep up the pace. Started this morning. I think I rolled out of here probably 4:30. I got there early on the job site, and we have been doing pick after pick after pick after pick after pick all day long. But I love it. I absolutely love it. And if Ryan is here, we're getting ready to go into the Ryan's Rabbit Hole segment, first of all. But if Ryan is here, one more chance for me to sing Ryan's praises and to thank him and voice my appreciation for him opening up this opportunity for me. So, yep, we've been at it since early morning, and we wound up late in the afternoon, and I got my ass back here as quick as I could and tried to, clean up and stabilize the guts a little bit so we could get through this thing. So now we're in it. Let's roll with it. First of all, let's go with it. Let me adjust the soundboard here. Ryan's Rabbit Hole. That ever popular segment, Ryan's Rabbit Hole. Yes, indeed. Feel free to give me a round of applause. Thank you. Certainly do appreciate that. Thank you for all the fans of Ryan's Rabbit Hole. Now, besides being an outstanding crane operator and a great friend, he is also one of the high priests of the esoteric and the obscure. We're not going to go super obscure this week. In fact, we are moving away from the conspiratorial back into the historical. That's usually how it runs. We either go philosophical, we go historical, or we go conspiratorial. And, we shuffle it around a little bit, keep everybody guessing. The rabbit hole this week is going to be that archaeologists may have finally solved the mystery of the disappearance of Roanoke's lost colony. That's right, boys and girls. Roanoke, Virginia. The fate of Roanoke's 115 settlers has been a mystery for centuries. Well, it has, but it hasn't. In 1585, settlers arrived from England. This was the first European founded settlement in the New World, and it also witnessed the birth of the first white European child in the New World, a young lady by the name of Virginia Dare. For more about Virginia Dare, feel free to go to vdare.com. You hear that? That's a dog whistle. Anyway, Virginia Dare was born in this first white European child born in the New World. The English settlers went back overseas to gather more supplies. And when they returned, the entire colony had completely disappeared into thin air without a trace. And the only clue that was left behind was carved into a tree, gone to Croatan. And of course, Croatoan Indian tribe, Native American First Nation. I don't even know what the fucking, you guys get the idea. They had partnered up with the white European settlers. They had built a symbiotic relationship and gone to Croatan, and boom, the entire colony disappeared. Well, I'm going to give you the article straight up, and you can go down the rabbit hole as far as you feel like going. This is from news.artnet.com. News.artnet.com. Now, of course, you can enter your basic, search engine functions, lost colony, lost Roanoke colony mystery, gone to Croatan, any of those things, you bounce those into one of your search engines and it's going to set you off down that rabbit hole. You get to hear about the entire history of how the colony came into being, about the interactions between the white European settlers and the First Nation tribe, the Croatans, and the supposed solving of them disappearing into thin air basically comes down to 23andMe. Yeah. 23andMe territory. They just have basically been doing a lot of genetic analysis of people with the Croatan bloodline and people with primarily European bloodlines that have the traces of that genetic lineage in their past. And through the combination of genetic research and historical research, they have put it together, and the story, or at least the hypothesis with which they have come up, is pretty fucking entertaining. Again, the main one that we're looking at here, news.artnet.com. And the story, archaeologists may have finally solved the mystery of the disappearance of Roanoke's lost colony. So get in and look it up. All right, I guess we're going to start hitting the bullet points. We are going to talk about mob mentality. We are going to talk about the fluence and ease with which our so-called leaders speak in DoubleSpeak. For you guys who are even remotely familiar with any of Orwell's work, but particularly 1984, the concepts of doublespeak and doublethink, and boy, we have it on parade today. But we're going to jump first, just a couple of the departments. We're going to swing through these little bullet point departments, these tabs that I hold up, before we get too far into the main topics that I want to cover today. This from the, well, it's not like we didn't see it coming department. This from Houston, Texas, and this is on Click to Houston local news. Houston, as you guys know, was my home for 26 years. Houston made me literally everything that I am, good, bad, and ugly. I have Houston to thank for all of it. And I have, to this day, a very love-hate relationship with the Houston metro area as a result of that. Sci-Fair ISD, for those of you guys that don't live in Houston, ISD is Independent School District. The way that it runs down there is all of these districts function independently, and they cover their own expenses, set their own curriculum. Sci-Fair ISD teacher bonds out of jail after allegedly putting a 13-year-old in the trunk for fear of COVID-19 exposure. Now, I don't want to make this racial or anything, but am I the only one that just thought, this is a liberal white bitch? First thing, I mean, when I heard child locked in trunk over COVID fear, sorry, that is a suburban college educated white woman right out of the gate. I don't need to wait around for verification. Obviously you're going to go just to double check, and the photo is there. And Sarah Beam, another about as Caucasian as it gets there. I love my people. You know that I love my people. You know that I'm down for my people. You also know that the main thing that I lament about my people is how we have lost our soul, is how we have lost our sense of direction, is how we have lost our cultural unity, is how we have lost our sense of cultural self-defense, cultural self-preservation, cultural self-determination, and given all that up for the sake of this grazer herd animal mentality. So let's hear a little bit more about Miss Sarah Beam. She was taken into custody at 3 p.m. on Saturday and posted a $1,500 bond. Well, one thing I got to give to District Attorney Kim Ogg, she at least made her post a fucking bond. I'm thinking if Sarah would have shot a cop, she probably would have been released on a PR bond, because that's how Kim Ogg, as district attorney down there, does things these days. And my friends from Houston will definitely back me up on that. She was taken into custody at 3 p.m. According to court documents, she had pulled into a drive-through testing site in Northwest Harris County when a witness reported hearing something in the trunk. That's usually a bad indicator. The witness said that when Beam unlatched the trunk, the boy was found lying down inside. Court documents said the witness told Beam she would not receive a COVID test until the child was removed from the trunk. Basically, she's got a 13-year-old, her 13-year-old child in the trunk of the car, and she's showing up to be tested. Her child had tested positive earlier, and she was not about to take the risk. Even with the mask, even with prior jabs, even with social distancing, she just wasn't going to feel safe until this 13-year-old child was locked in the trunk of a car. This is what we've created. This is what this absolute goddamned lunacy has created. Terrifying that a woman is willing to lock her own child in the trunk of a car for fear of exposure to, and again, this woman, otherwise healthy that we know of, no comorbidities. She's not morbidly obese from the looks of her. Maybe she's diabetic, who fucking knows? But to be that fucking irrationally afraid of a respiratory virus with a 99.7% survival rate, that you are going to lock your own 13-year-old child in the trunk of a car. There are two takeaways from this before we move on to the next bullet point. Just a couple of takeaways that just popped into my head when I'm, going over this and processing it for the sake of my own psychological well-being. Takeaway number one, is that when I saw this thing come through my Twitter feed, at first I was like, man, you got to be kidding me. This isn't. And, then I did the fact checks on the local network affiliates, and, NewsTube Houston plays it as straight as any other legacy media outlet. But the first takeaway that I came with was somebody somewhere, and when I say somebody, I'm talking somebodies, likely in the thousands, are looking at that story, and while they may not say it in a public forum, they feel in their heart of hearts that it was a perfectly fucking reasonable thing to do. That locking your 13-year-old child in the trunk of your car because you're worried about being exposed to COVID, a respiratory infection with a 99.7% survival rate, that they feel like that was a perfectly rational and reasonable course of action. This is the culture that we've created, boys and girls. And the second important takeaway, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out the comic irony of this part of it, had that child suffocated and died in the trunk of that car, who wants to roll the dice with me and take a few bets on whether or not that would have been counted as a COVID death? A couple of you are chuckling. A couple of you are nodding. And you're all probably correct in one form or another, because it is all falling apart now. Here's the thing. If you've been following this program, and if you are one of my friends and you follow any of my social media at all, or we've had a conversation anytime since 2019, if you have followed or looked at any of these things, you know that we are in complete agreement that one of the things that the numbers fail to do, and of course we were called tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist science deniers for this, one of the things that they have failed to do is take into account the important distinction between being hospitalized with COVID or being hospitalized due to COVID. Take that one further when it gets to the figures on death. One of the things that I have pointed out, and you have heard me beat this to death from the very first days when Ryan was still giving me shit for it being the COVID cast. And I'm glad you made it, Ryan. I'm glad you made it. One of the things that I pointed out was that most of the people that were in these hospitals, whether they wound up dying or not, they were being hospitalized with it, and they had 4 or more comorbidities. 4 or more comorbidities. So myself and all of my Reverends Rangers and my Sinner Sisters and my Prophets of Doom out there, we were quite correctly pointing out that these people they're not going into the hospital from COVID. They're going in because they're fucking morbidly obese. They're fucking type 2 diabetic. They've got prior respiratory illnesses. Their eating habits are shit. They wouldn't know what a vitamin was if it was injected into them directly. They are in bad fucking health. And so this virus comes along and goes, because that's all it takes for a person who's in that fucking bad shape. And now you're over the edge and now you fucking died. Did you really die of COVID? Doesn't matter. Going to be counted as dying of COVID. And we had the temerity, and by temerity I mean honesty, to suggest, as it turns out correctly, that the numbers were being padded. That anyone who died with COVID was being put down as if they had died of COVID. We pointed out, and you will remember this from about this time last year, when I was still in San Marcos at Charlie's place, you will remember me pointing that out, that some of the more egregious examples, ones that came out of the state of Colorado, for instance, where more than 3, I don't remember exactly how much more than 3, but I remember it was more than 3 cases coming out of one hospital district where gunshot wounds were being treated as COVID death because the people had the positive PCR test within whatever the window of time, whatever that time frame is between the PCR test and the time that they die. So we pointed this out, and we went further to suggest that there was, in all likelihood, a financial component to it, because these hospitals are getting paid more from the federal government if it is a COVID death because of the alleged, and when it is a COVID case, this is a correct way to charge because it's a lot more labor and resource intensive. But when you got a guy that comes in who drowned, you got a guy that comes in who's a stage 4 cancer patient, he's on his last leg, and he tests positive for COVID and dies 2 days later because stage 4 fucking cancer patient, it goes down as a COVID death. And eventually these numbers are all going to get sorted out. The thought that legitimately nearly 800,000 people have died is absurd on its face. And now it's coming out. Taking it back to Rochelle Walensky, here's where it's getting a little odd. This is the CDC director herself, Rochelle Walensky, admitting on ABC's Good Morning America what a lot of people, myself included, have been saying all along. I'll let you listen to it for yourself.
4 comorbidities. So really these are people who were
run that back.
Illness. Given that, is it time to start rethinking how we're living with this virus, that it's potentially here to stay?
The overwhelming number of deaths, over 75%, occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So really these are people who were unwell to begin with. And yes, really encouraging news in the context of Omicron. This means not only
for illness.
So yeah, 75%. 75%. 4 or more major comorbidities. Now, this is stuff that we were pointing out from the very beginning, and some of us were booted for up to 30 days for pointing this out on certain social media platforms, because we were denying the official narrative. And the official narrative was that every COVID death was a legitimate COVID death, and the comorbidities were just, I mean, it was a factor, but it didn't really relate. And if we say they died of COVID, then they died of COVID, and these numbers aren't to be opposed or questioned in any way, shape, or form. And then suddenly, once we get the cadaver in chief in office and he's staggering his little addled ass around, now we got to re-examine the way that we're doing this. Why? Because somebody took a look and went, hey, we got Biden in the White House now, and in spite of the fact that this entire year he has had access to these vaccines, this entire year, they have pushed and done everything short of going door to door to encourage people to get vaccines. They are attempting mandates. They have lockdown rules. They have social distancing. They have mask mandates in all these fucking places for an entire goddamn year. And somehow we've wound up with more people dead. More dead in 2021 under Biden than in 2020 under Trump. And of course, and you already know what's the first thing they're going to say. Well, yeah, but that's because of the unvaccinated. Let me clear something up for you, Sparky. You don't really have a much more solid number with regard to the percentage of unvaccinated than 100%. Because until November of 2020, that was the percentage of unvaccinated. 100% of the population. Why? Because we didn't have the fucking vaccines yet. No one was vaccinated. And so now, using the same numbers and the same criteria, we look a year later, and in spite of the fact that he's had the vaccines, and in spite of the fact that he's had the social distancing and the lockdowns and the mask mandates and all these other things that he's fucking pushing for, he has lost more people. And you can't blame the unvaccinated. That's their narrative. Well, yeah, it's because there's so many people still aren't vaccinated. Yeah, well, in 2020, 100% of the people weren't vaccinated, and we didn't have those numbers. So now we have to change the narrative. Not because we're genuinely concerned about public health, certainly, and not because we're remotely concerned about facts, but they're having to change the way they look at it, because it's no longer serving the case for great leader, for great exalted chairman, for Chairman Mao. It's not here at the beginning of year zero. It's not painting a very good picture of the man. So now we have to re-examine it. We have to re-examine it before we examined it through the lens of every COVID death had to be a COVID death, because what they wanted to do was inflate the numbers, because Orange Man bad, and the worse that we make him look, the sooner we get rid of him, and the more things we can justify, mail-in balloting, all of the other stuff. We watched it happen. In the Washington Times, they bragged about it, saying that they had to save the election, not hijack the election, of course. Get back off a tangent street here. Now, that same criteria is making exalted great leader Pumbaa look really, really bad, which is not something that he can have with everything else that's going on. After the disaster in Afghanistan, after the disaster of canceling the Keystone Pipeline, after the disaster of the fucking southern border, he can't ride all of that, and the COVID thing too. So now, at long last, the CDC is getting around to preaching the same thing that all of us have been preaching from day one. One of my favorite quotes in the world, pioneering psychedelic researcher Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World. And I'm doing my best. I may be paraphrasing just a shade here. The course of every intellectual, if he stays at it tenaciously and thoroughly enough, arrives at the obvious, a place from which the non-intellectual has never stirred. Big flowery way of saying there's a difference between book sense and common sense. But it takes people that are hyper intellectualized in that book sense kind of way to be able to spin the intellectual gymnastics, to be able to spin the narrative and take it where it needs to go. And they're really good at fooling other smart people, because us dumbass toothless yokels down here, it ain't much for that reading stuff. But we're not easily fooled. The Zen of Jed Clampett. Old Beverly Hillbillies episode. One of the older ones in black and white. And Jed is having a crisis of confidence. And Drysdale, of course, the stereotype representing, the big bank and the financial controllers and everything. And Jed's just a simple little hillbilly, but he's having a crisis of confidence. He doesn't have a purpose anymore. Now that he's not living in the hills and all his needs are taken care of, he doesn't have a purpose anymore. So Drysdale decides he's going to find him a hobby. Because you need to find yourself a hobby. Because all of a sudden, Jed is walking through the middle of Beverly Hills with a little tool cart, offering handyman services to fix up people's houses, which would work in my neighborhood, not so much in Beverly Hills. I digress. Drysdale tries to find him a hobby. And he shows him a boat inside a bottle. Now, Jed doesn't understand. Again, you're dealing with higher intellectual constructs guy versus simple man. And Drysdale shows him the boat. And he was like, well, how's he gonna sail it? What? How's he gonna sail it? Trapped in a bottle like that. How's he gonna sail it? Well, he's not gonna sail it. Then why'd he build it? Well, that's his hobby. It's what he does. And it took a lot of craftsmanship and time and investment. And I get, sounds to me like he wasted a boat and a bottle. Yes, but what about all the hours of devotion and craftsmanship and precision handiwork? Yep, wasted them too. Anyway, just a little brief departure, man. The Zen of Jed Clampett. Here are some other things that have come out. And I promise we're not going to go off on another tear. I'm going to keep it straight through because I got a lot of bullet points to cover, man. And we are about 40 minutes in. So we got about 20 minutes left. We still got plenty of stuff to cover. Not only are they coming around to admitting the things that we've been saying from day one, that there is a distinction between dying with COVID and dying of COVID. They're having to admit some other things as well. Stuff that was, from right off the bat, we said that cloth masks were useless. And of course, you can draw a distinction. You can draw a distinction between N95 masks in a surgical setting inside of a hospital. Yes, clearly that's different. Dr. Lena Wen. You familiar with Lena Wen? Another one of the Gulag Barbies without nearly the charm of AOC. Yeah, I don't say that lightly. Anyway, Lena Wen has been very prominently featured on CNN, and everything that she has said has just been bone chilling. It's all, and she's very, very naked about it, that we need to keep the fear going and ramp people into forced compliance. It needs to be about compliance, because once they're not afraid of it anymore, we won't have this window. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but not by much. Leanawen, Lena Wen. Look it up. Terrifying. All about the compliance, all about the control. And up until last week, all about the masks. Why? Because that plays into the control narrative, it plays into the fear narrative. Does it actually help? No. And that was always the retort. We need to get these people in the habit of complying with mask mandates and things like that, but the masks don't help. Oh, you're a science denier. And look, if we're saying that you've got to wear the mask, you can't argue with the science. And Lena Wen, charming little claptrap that she is, came out last week and finally admitted this is dumb, that cloth masks do nothing. Now, she's been fronted out about this before, specifically with cloth masks, specifically drawing the distinction between N95s in a hospital setting and cloth masks out in public. But remember, she's always been about the compliance. That's what always drives her. It's what all of this has been about from day one. Comply. Put on the damn mask. But she came out and said, I do not think that Mayor de Blasio should cancel NYC's New Year's celebration. This is outdoors and requires vaccination. Yes, Omicron is surging, but we need to continue activities that are of high value while adding precautions that reduce risk. I have not seen her that open to any public interaction with anything since the George Floyd riots. Those were okay. Those weren't going to spread it. Those weren't super spreader events. Sturgis, yeah, got to shut that down. Pro football games, definitely got to shut those down. College football games, particularly ones where they're cheering for the president, got to shut down. Super spreader events, wear your fucking mask. But she came out in that interview and said the cloth masks are ridiculous. They do no good at all. Fauci, not to be outdone, a couple of days later, reinforced that exact thing. This is his 6th, 8th position shift on the value of cloth mask. I can't even keep up anymore. Nobody bothers to keep up. And this is basically what, it's basically the source of the rift. But they admit it now. Here's another one that they admitted. And this is literally 3 days ago. COVID vaccines can cause minor menstrual cycle changes. Do you guys remember when I popped off with that? Do you guys remember when I went after that on the fan page and got one of my earliest 30-day bans? Because I pointed out the obvious, that the menstrual cycle is related to what system? Reproductive. Now, you don't have to take that and say, wow, what system would I really want to damage if I was trying to control? Because it's easy enough to kill someone. It's easy to kill someone right now. If I want to make sure that a particular bloodline or a particular generation or a particular demographic ends with this, what system would you want to affect? Obviously, the reproductive system. And I pointed this out. About this time last year, I was still in San Marcos, picked up a 30-day ban for suggesting it. All because I pointed out there were changes in the menstrual cycle. And what I got in return, both from the legacy media and from proponents of the narrative, from people who are no longer involved in my life, who I've been excising like fucking tumors, what I got back from them was, well, the VAERS system where they're reporting it, this is probably juggled and that's been manipulated and that guy's work's been thoroughly debunked and, this is all speculation about the menstrual thing and it's going to wind up being nothing. Well, it's not fucking nothing now, is it, Sparky? It's all coming out. From NPR, no less. COVID vaccines. Now, when you enter that, again, difference between Google and DuckDuckGo, you enter that into Google, they still had to lead off with the truth, but they tried to minimize it. COVID vaccines cause minor menstrual cycle changes. That's not exactly true. Some of these fucking menstrual cycle changes have been profound and very, very damaging. National Institutes of Health, 3 days ago. Again, it's like everybody got on message 3 fucking days ago and started copping to all of these things that we've been saying from the beginning, and we were called conspiracy theorists. NIH, COVID-19 vaccination associated with a small temporary increase in menstrual cycle length, suggests NIH-funded study. Okay. CNN repeated that same thing. CDC, myths and facts concerning blah, 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 blah. Women's periods may be late. Again, 3 days ago, from the New York Times. Women's periods may be late after coronavirus vaccination or may not show up for months at a time. We're not going to get into that. They're certainly not going to get into that. On and on and on. Periods may be late. Periods can alter menstrual cycles. Medscape. Vaccination has little impact on menstrual cycle. All these press releases from all these different agencies 3 days ago, they got a message. The same time they copped to the difference between dying of COVID, dying with COVID 3 days ago on that fucking memo as well. Because the legacy media, once they get it together, they're in their death throes right now. They're terrified. They've tried to throw the January 6th thing at us, and people aren't buying that either. You can call it an insurrection all day long, but if you're going to call it the worst attack against democracy since September the 11th, I would think you'd want at least a dozen people dead. If you were going to call it the worst assault on our democracy since the Civil War, you'd think that maybe, I don't know, one guy would have brought a fucking gun. Nobody's buying it. Not even mainstream liberals are buying it at this point. I would think that at the very least, if you're going to call it an insurrection, that one of the 700 plus that have even been charged in connection to January 6th. Keep in mind, 250,000 people on the fucking ground, conservative estimate. 250,000 people on the ground. 700-ish, 700 give or take, are even charged. And not one, not one charged with treason, sedition, terrorism. Not one. 250,000 people on the ground, 700 arrested and charged. Not one of them charged with sedition, treason, terrorism, any of these things. Not one. Kind of tough to sell a narrative about it being the worst assault on our democracy since the Civil War, isn't it? But again, that's a little bit down tangent street. We're gonna push off of that for a minute. They are terrified. They're terrified because of all of the things that they have tried to push. All the things that they have tried to push from day one. Insurrection's not working. And now the cult of fear thing, Father Fauci and company, well, that's not working for them either. They keep lashing out. They keep trying. Everybody's in bed with everybody else. I'm going to show you a little picture right here. This is inside a restaurant, and you will notice that we've got Klobuchar, Amy Klobuchar, seated next to Justice Sonia Sotomayor, that wise Latina. Oh, thank God we have the insight of a wise Latina being brought to the court. Whatever could we have done without her? They're all meeting and eating the day before the arguments start over the mask mandates. None of them are fucking masked. Not one. Not one. Not a single one of them are masked. And the very next day, the arguments begin in the Supreme Court case. So the insurrection thing isn't doing it, and now the cult of fear isn't doing it. Two attorneys challenging the vaccine mandates appear at SCOTUS virtually due to COVID protocols. This is all just in a basic Google search. SCOTUS blog court seemed poised to block vaccine or test policy. Here's the reason I bring up affirmative action Justice Sotomayor with regard to this. and why the cult of fear thing is falling apart. They are pushing the vaccine mandate, and guess what? So it's not getting traction. It's not. And Sotomayor, who literally in that picture, the night before testimony starts, hearing this, knowing that Pelosi and Klobuchar are both high-powered political figures in the House. They both have a vested interest in Biden's mandate being upheld. And there they are, maskless, because they don't really believe it, bending Sotomayor's ear. And she got up and spewed the most insane parade of bullshit I think I've ever heard. And the woman is not bright. There's nothing notable about her in any of her previous testimonies to the court, a dissent that she's written, an opinion that she's written, nothing. She's a dimwit. She literally, when I refer to her as an affirmative action justice, she's literally an affirmative action justice. And I don't mean simply because she was put in that position because they wanted a Latina. As in, she did not qualify to get into law school. She didn't make the cut. Her test scores weren't high enough. 3 times she took the test. Test scores weren't high enough. Intelligence test wasn't high enough. But affirmative action lowered the standards, and now Sonia Sotomayor is Supreme Court Justice. In much the same way that, I don't know, if the circumstances arose, a cackling whore for Willie Brown could wind up VP. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but weird time to be alive. They're arguing the mask mandate, and it's not working. Nobody's buying it. So the cult of fear isn't working. They can't drive this. They can't drive the January 6th narrative anymore. That's played out as far as it's going to. They keep pushing, but they pass the point of diminishing returns. The harder they push, the less they get out of it. Contrast that with one single person. What one single person outside of the legacy media is able to do. And Joe Rogan's done it twice in the past 2 weeks. One was the interview with McCullough. The other was the interview with Malone, Robert Malone. I was just looking through. And when I went to do a search on Robert Malone, literally, okay, so here's the thing. In his resume and before the Rogan interviews, it was generally accepted that he was one of the pioneers in mRNA vaccine research. Ever since those interviews, this is how it gets framed from Forbes. Who is Malone? Well, he's listed himself as the inventor of mRNA vaccines and DNA vaccines on his LinkedIn account. Of course, you could probably list yourself as king of all dinosaurs on such a profile if you wanted. Others have questioned his inventor claim, but more on that later. There is no more on that later. They just got to paint the picture. Now, I haven't found anything to substantiate that Malone isn't a pioneering researcher in mRNA. But I'm not a virologist. It's not like I would fucking know. The media framing is the thing. McCullough, segueing back to death of the legacy media, and then we're going to bring it into the home stretch here. McCullough's interview has over 50 million views now. 50 million people have watched Joe Rogan's interview with Dr. McCullough. How early treatment was suppressed. How the entire thing has been manipulated right out of the starting gate. 50 million people have seen that now. And we're climbing up the same numbers with Robert Malone. Now, why is Malone important? Because Malone, his interview was on mass formation psychosis. There's an old book from 1841, if memory serves, 1841. Popular Delusion and the Madness of Crowds. Douglas Murray has recently done a different book called The Madness of Crowds, which you should also take a look at. But the old one, the 1841 book, Popular Delusion and the Madness of Crowds. And it goes into example after example after example of what Malone described in the interview as, and his words, mass formation psychosis. Well, how did they respond? You know good and well how they respond. How did Reuters respond? How did Reuters fact check respond? Mass formation psychosis is not an academic term recognized in the field of psychology, nor is there evidence of any such phenomenon occurring during the COVID-19 pandemic. Multiple experts in crowd psychology have told Reuters. What would Huxley have to say about that? The course of every intellectual. If he stays on it long and tenaciously enough, he's going to arrive in the obvious. This is where they've completely lost control. And this is why, no matter what, we're going to win. Brief sidebar. One of the historical examples of what could be considered mass formation psychosis of previously psychologically stable, intellectually sound, culturally evolved, even people descending into mob mentality, like a herd of animals, like a pack of chimps being unleashed on a pack of mountain gorillas, like we talked about last week. You know, primates are going to war now. Go back and look at last week's and do your homework on that. But they're flat out denying it. Now, of course, the historical examples of this phenomenon date back to way before 1841. But that particular book is something that every one of you, all my Rangers out there, all my Center Sisters, if you've got some downtime, you're looking for a good old book, go and take a look at this, particularly now that they are trying to dog out Rogan and they're trying to dog out Malone and try to tell you that this mass formation psychosis is something completely fucking made up. As if Kristallnacht in Germany wouldn't have been an example. Or for that matter, the rise to power of the Third Reich at all in a nation like Germany. The French Revolution. How about that? Robespierre and the guillotine. Mass formation psychosis. There you could just call it mob rule. What are all the COVID measures there for? They're there for what? Public what? Not public health. Public health too, but what? Public safety. Do you want to know what Robespierre's mob was called during the French Revolution when they were dragging rich people out of their homes and fucking taking their heads off with guillotines? Committee for Public Safety. Feel free to look that up as well. How about the Mountain Meadow Massacre in Utah? For those of you guys who want to dig back into the Mormon country and the LDS Church. How about the madness that overwhelmed us in the days post 9/11, where we couldn't give our civil liberties away fast enough? How about that? How about McCarthyism? People are going to have mixed feelings on that. I know I do. They want to dog out Senator McCarthy for, the House Un-American Activities Committee. First of all, Senator McCarthy, what committee? House Un-American Activities Committee. But again, separating that. And the fact that a lot of that stuff did get found to be 100% totally correct. The blacklist in Hollywood, overreaction. Looking for communists under every bed, overreaction. We don't need to reach back that far. White supremacists, right-wing, alt-right, violent extremists under every bed. Couldn't that be an example? But no, instead we're told by Reuters that mass formation psychosis does not exist. That the thought that we could look at a population like the one in which we live, repeating the same exact behaviors that we saw come out of them one time before when fear was used to manipulate. And I'll go you one better. And we've discussed this again over the past couple of weeks. Some of the people, very same people that stood side by side with me raging for 18 years about the executive overreaches of the George W. Bush administration and the Alberto Gonzales Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, the international and national, more to the point, surveillance state, intrusions on our civil rights. We have never been the same. And we're going through it again. The entire population cudgeled with this fear. And some of these same people that stood side by side with me for 8 years, I thought, as I stated in my New Year's speech last weekend, I thought that they were anti-authoritarian. I thought that they were principled. As it turns out, they weren't. They just hadn't found the right boogeyman yet. Now they've got it. And they're insisting that this boogeyman be everybody's. But mass formation psychosis, popular delusion, the madness of crowds, that's never happened before in human history. There certainly aren't historical examples of it, and no respectable psychological professional would even discuss such a thing. They are discussing it. Take a look at the ratings. So many people like to bag on Joe Rogan. I've met Joe. I've hung out with him on several occasions. I have found him to be a man of honesty and integrity. Funny as fuck. Definitely not a man to be trifled with. If Rogan decides he wants your old lady, best go ahead and hand her over. Because, dude's worth $100 million. He's funnier than you. Definitely makes more money than you do. And can beat the fuck out of you standing up or, on the ground. So best just to hand her over. I'm kidding. Rogan, Joe's a stand-up guy. And I hear so many haters. And I hate even the use of that word. You especially hater. Yeah. But for lack of a better word. Joe Rogan is a dumb person's idea of a smart person. I hear that a lot about Jordan Peterson too. Different realm. We can get into JBP another day, and we will, because I like Jordan Peterson. The point is this. Rogan is doing 10 times the viewership of the highest rated legacy media program with regard to news, which happens to be Tucker Carlson, by the way. horrible, alt-right adjacent, right-wing extremist, white supremacist, yet, highest ranking news show on television. And yet Rogan, who they also now are trying to squeeze into the white supremacist, alt-right adjacent box, squeezing him into that box, he's not going to fit. He's doing 10 times the viewership that Carlson is. Why? Jordan B. Peterson nailed it this week in a single tweet. The reason why Rogan is doing so well with his program is because he doesn't lie to people, he doesn't condescend, and he doesn't talk down. He asks people questions and then lets them answer. And that's what he did with Malone. Malone has since been banned from Twitter. McCulloch has since been banned from Twitter. Rogan, you can't fucking cancel. He's got a $100 million contract with Spotify. And even if that went away tomorrow, you don't think he'd pop up in another incarnation and still be rocking it? Because he is resonating with people. This mass formation psychosis thing is real. That's why they're having to go after Rogan so fucking hard. That's why they're having to go after all of us so fucking hard. You hear me say it at least once every couple of weeks. Fundamentally, people are suckers for the truth. And when you've got people out there like Malone speaking the truth, or McCulloch speaking the truth, or Rogan interviewing greater intellects than himself and just giving him a chance to answer a question, where the rest of the world tries to actively shut them down, that's going to resonate with people. And it is. Legacy media is dead. Mass formation psychosis, far from it. Alive, well, and kicking. But we're starving it of oxygen right now. We're starving it of oxygen. And I think we all need to pay more attention to that quote from Huxley. You can do hashtag in a day long. This is why, and Orwell lamented this as well, that you had to have a serious intellect to believe the dumbest of things, because there are some serious Olympic level intellects involved. But the good thing about us toothless, fat, crippled, poor folk who don't read too good is that we live out here in the real world. We can process things for ourselves. We don't need to be spoon-fed. I don't know how much. I don't know how much of that you caught. Somebody want to tell me exactly where you remember me dropping off, because that was a big fucking finish, and I really hate. I really hate that it did that. If anybody is still on board and anybody is still paying attention, if you guys are still there, somebody just kind of wave at me a little bit, and I'll bring it home and I'll close it out. I don't know how much of that lost. Just like that, we're back in the corner fight. Okay, yeah, George, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. Jerry Coyne still made a little mob crazy. It was okay. Come on. Well, I don't know. For anybody who is still there. Okay, Dennis. Tell me exactly where I cut out, and I'll just bring it home and I'll close it out. I don't know exactly what happened there. I got my suspicions about what happened there, but what was the last tangential sort of poignant thing that I was getting into before it cut me off? I don't know exactly when. Dennis, you got anything? What was the last thing? Lost it. Hillbillies. Okay, Tommy, that's cool. Yes. That is a great thing about us hillbilly folk that don't do reading too good. Yes, sir. The beauty of that is in your own intellectual pursuits, no matter what they may be, small scale, large scale, however it rolls. Keep coming back to Huxley, because fundamentally people are suckers for the truth. Us ignorant hillbillies out here don't read too good, miss a few teeth. Yeah, we ain't too smart. Hell of a lot smarter than you give us credit for, Sparky. Believe that. And the beauty of being where I am, just a crane operator with some opinions. I'm not a virologist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social influencer, such as it's understood. I'm not that guy. Just a crane operator with some opinions. Ordinary human being talking to other ordinary human beings, trying to point things out from a perspective they might not have looked at before. But when I go charging in like that, I'm not equipped for the intellectual gymnastics that are required. Orwell lamented that as well. That it takes hardcore intellectuals to be able to believe really, really stupid things because of the intellectual gymnastics that are required. Right here, no intellectual gymnastics required. When you are on that path, when you are taking the path of the intellect, remember what Huxley said. Stay at it long and tenaciously enough, and you will arrive at the obvious. A position from where I and my Reverends Rangers and my Sinner Sisters and my Prophets of Doom, a position from which we have never stirred. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. Appreciate you guys being patient. All the difficulties and things. We do what we can. That lost me again. I'm going to pass program. Hopefully you got something out of it. And if you did, great. You want to throw me some coin? I'm on PayPal. A little bit of clutch to close out the show. Appreciate you guys being here again. Going to pass around the digital collection plate. You guys want to throw me some coin? That would be fantastic. If you cannot afford to do so, or if you are not so inclined, I'm totally all right with that as well. What you can do to help me out is spread the word. Smash that like button, that subscribe button. Spread the word. Talk to your friends about it. Let them know. It's like, hey, but in the meantime, you guys know the prime directives, man. Stay with it.
But when the territory comes to the door, Lord, the house looks like a woman saying,
As always, guys, strive to be the signal, not the noise. To be that light in a world full of darkness. And this is the iron rule, to always be that strength in a world full of weakness. Show no mercy. Show no mercy. Strength in a world full of weakness, people. I appreciate you guys being here. Sorry about all the difficulties and the hiccups and all the other stuff, man. We do what we do. Smash that like button, subscribe, spread the word, tell people about it. Share it on your own social media, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you're running. Give it a shot. But as always, thank you guys for being here. I love y'all, man. Support means the world to me. Every single week, man. Put it together. Even when we got the hiccups, we're going to put it together for you. I love you guys, man. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. Peace. See you next Sunday, guys.